This is chapter 11. It's page 660 in your textbook, and we're doing 11-1, which is solving quadratic equations by completing the square. Okay, so let's go with example 1. It says use square root property to solve x squared equals 50. So if you have x squared equals 50, then how would you solve this? You would just take the square root of both sides. So you're taking the square root of a square, so that cancels out. So you have x equals square root of 50, which you can simplify by saying square root 25 times square root 2, and this becomes 5 times the square root of 2. Okay, go ahead and press pause and try practice 1. All right, practice 1 says x squared equals 32. So you're going to do the same thing. Take the square root of each side to cancel this out here. So you have x equals square root 32. That can be rewritten as square root 16 times square root 2. You end up with 4 times the square root of 2. Okay, let's do example 2 here. Example 2 says use square root property to solve, get a different color here. 2x squared minus 14 equals 0. Okay, so we're going to solve algebraically just like we would anything else. So add 14 to both sides. So you have 2x squared equals 14, divide by 2. You have x squared equals 7. Okay, so now solve just like we did over here. Go ahead and take the square root of both sides. So you have x equals the square root of 7. And here it's important to see, and when we go on, and I didn't do it on this one, but I should have, when you have the square root of something, let's say we have the square root of 9, okay? So if I just asked you what is square root of 9, you would probably say that it's 3, right? But couldn't it also be negative 3? It could. So your answer here will be plus or minus whatever the square root of 7 is, because you're just multiplying two values together, and they're either both going to be positive or they're both going to be negative to give you the square root of 7, to give you this value here. Okay? All right, so go ahead and press pause and try practice 2. Okay, so practice 2 says use square root property to solve 5x squared minus 50 equals 0. So we're going to add 50 to both sides. So we're going to have 5x squared equals 50, divide by 5. And we have x squared equals 50 divided by 5 is 10. Take the square root of both sides. X equals square root of 10, and whatever the square root of 10 is going to be plus or minus. So your answer would be x equals square root of 10 or x equals the negative square root of 10. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and look at example 3. Example 3 says we're going to use square root property to solve x plus 1 squared equals 12. Okay, so if you were solving just for x, one thing you could do is you could FOIL this out, and then you could solve for x. To solve using square root property, however, we're going to follow along what we've been doing. Take the square root of both sides, so we have x plus 1 equals square root of 12. now you're going to subtract 1 from each side. So we have -1 plus or minus square root of 12. Well, this can be simplified to square root of 4 times square root of 3. And this is 2, so 2 times the square root of 3. So you have plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3. We have -1. There we go. X equals -1 plus or minus this 2 times the square root of 3. All right, so go ahead and press pause and try example 3, please. Okay, so here we have, or try practice 3. Here we have x plus 3 squared equals 20. Okay, so to apply the square root property, we're going to take the square root of both sides. So we have x plus 3 equals square root 20. Simplify this. Square root of 4 times square root of 5. So here we have 2 times the square root of 5. And we know it's going to be plus or minus. Now we're going to subtract 3 here to this side over here. So we end up with x equals -3 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 5. And if you want to type that in your calculator, you will come up with a positive and a negative decimal. Okay. Moving on, number 4. Okay, let's do this one. 2x minus 5. Oh, actually, we're not going to do this one because we didn't do imaginary numbers in the last couple chapters. We skipped it and moved on to save time. Okay, so not doing 4. Let's go over to example 5. Example 5, we're going to actually solve by completing the square now. This is not my favorite method, but it's not terrible. How many pages is this? Oh, okay. I think I can fit this whole lesson into one YouTube video. Okay, so we're going to solve by completing the square. So on example 5, we have p squared plus 2p equals 4. Okay, so to complete the square, the first thing you're going to do is, I always say label what's your A and your B, and you don't have a C value here, but we need a C value. This would be your A and this would be your B, and you're missing that C value. And you need that, and yes, we could subtract 4 here, and that would be our C value, but having a -4 on this side is not going to give us a perfect square that we're trying to get to solve by completing the square. So we're looking for that perfect square trinomial. So we're going to add a new C value here. And again, whatever you add to one side of the equation, you have to add to the other side of the equation. So we're going to get our new C value, you're going to take your B value here, which is 2. You're going to divide it by 2, and you're going to square it. And this is going to equal our new C value, new C, okay? So it's B divided by 2 squared, whatever your value is. Ours happens to be 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 1 squared is 1. So we're going to rewrite our equation here. P squared plus 2p plus 1 equals 4, and we have to add it over here also. So in labeling, A, this is our B, this is our C, okay? All right, so now we are going to factor our problem here. And we know now that it equals 5 on this side. All right, so bring your variable down. The next thing you can do, to get this right here, first of all, both of these are positive, so we're dealing only in positive numbers here. There's a little shortcut to finding what goes here. This one, we can just look at it, and we know that it's 1 just by looking at it, because the only thing that are going to multiply together to get 1 is 1. But what if you have some fraction here or something else that makes it difficult to just look at it and see what you're multiplying here and adding here. You can actually take your b value and divide it by 2, and that is what's going to go here. So our b value is 2, we divide it by 2, it gives us 1, so 1 goes here. So we're going to rewrite this as p plus 1 squared equals 5. Okay, now we're going to apply the square root method, and we're going to take the square root of both sides, and we have p plus 1 equals square root 5. All right, subtract your 1, p equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 5. Okay, and that's how you're going to solve by completing the square. All right, go ahead, press pause please, and try practice 5. Okay, practice 5 says solve b squared plus 4b equals 3. I'm going to go ahead and scoot over so I don't have to rewrite this problem because it says solve by completing the square. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to find our new c value, what goes here, and to do that we're going to say b divided by 2 squared. All right, and that is our 4 divided by 2 squared. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So we're going to add 4 here and over here. Okay, so now let's factor this. We have 7 now over here on the right-hand side of the equal sign. Bring down your b. And again, 2 positive numbers makes it nice and easy. All right, what should go here? Well, obviously we can tell by looking that it's 2's. But if this was difficult, we would say b divided by 2, and that's what would go there. And that would be 4 divided by 2, and that's what goes there. Okay, so rewrite this. B plus 2 squared equals 7. Take the square root of each side. B plus 2 equals the square root of 7. Subtract that 2. B equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 7. Okay, let's go on now to example 6. All right, example 6. We have one with fractions here. We have m squared minus 7m minus 1 equals 0. All right, the first thing we need to do is we need to get a new c value that will allow us to have that perfect square set up. So we're going to add 1 to both sides, and then we're going to find our new c value here. So we're going to say b divided by 2 squared. That's going to give us 7, negative 7 actually. This is our b. This whole thing is b, negative 7. Divided by 2 squared, and we're going to leave space here when we rewrite this. All right, so m squared minus 7m. Okay, so what is negative 7 over 2 squared? Okay, so you're just, when you're squaring a fraction, and we did this, you just square the top and you square the bottom. So you have 49 over 4. So, and it's positive, so we're going to add that to both sides. So plus 49 over 4 here, and now we have moved this 1 over here, so we have 1, and we're going to add 49 over 4 right here. Okay, so before we go any farther, let's take care of this. So we need to add 1 plus 49 over 4. Well, this is the same as saying 4 over 4. So we end up with 53 over 4 for this right side of the equal sign. Okay, so let's factor this. And we know it equals 53 over 4. All right, bring down your m. Here's one of those situations where you can't see just by looking at it what should go here. And this is negative. So we know we're dealing with 2 negative numbers here because we have to have a positive over here. And the only way you can get a positive number over here is by multiplying 2 positives or 2 negatives. Since this is negative, we're going to be multiplying 2 negatives. So take your b value here and divide it by 2. So our b value is 7, and we're going to divide it by 2. Okay? All right, let's rewrite this. M minus 7 over 2 squared equals 53 over 4. Take the square root of each side. All right, m minus 7 over 2 equals the square root of 53. Remember, this can be split up now over the square root of 4. We're going to add 7/2 to this side, to each side, to get rid of it, to isolate our m here. So m equals 7/2 plus or minus square root 53 over, what is the square root of 4? 2. Okay, well, we have a common denominator here. So we can simplify that and say m equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 53 over 2. And that would be your answer. All right, press pause and try example or practice 6. Okay, practice 6 says solve p squared minus 3p plus 1 equals 0. All right, so we're going to move this 1 to this side over here, and we're going to come up with a new b value by taking our b value, dividing it by 2, and squaring it. All right, so 3/2 squared, so we're going to end up with 9 over 4. So we're going to add that to both sides now. So we have p squared minus 3p plus 9 over 4 equals negative 1 plus 9 over 4. Okay, so let's take care of this. Negative 1 is the same as saying negative 4 over 4. So let's combine that. So we end up with 5 over 4 here. So now, as we factor it, bring down your p. Again, take this, divide it by 2, and we have a positive number here and a negative here. So we're going to end up with 2 negatives. 3 divided by 2 is 3/2. All right, rewrite it. P minus 3 over 2 squared equals 5/4. Okay, take the square root of each side. P minus 3 over 2 equals the square root of 5 over the square root of 4. All right, add this. So we have P equals 3/2 plus or minus the square root of 5 over, what is the square root of 4? 2. Okay, you can simplify it because it's a common denominator. So we have 3 plus or minus the square root of 5 over 2. All right, so let's go ahead and do example 7 now. All right, example 7 says solve 2x squared minus 8x plus 3 equals 0. Okay, so it's really the same except for one thing, and that is we can't have a value other than 1 right here to solve using completing the square. So you're going to go ahead, and before you do anything else, you're going to divide everything by 2. Everything by 2. All right, I'm actually going to do part 2.